Good evening and welcome to Newsmax Prime. I'm Rick Blackwell in for J.D. Hayworth. Great to have you with us. Now, prime interest tonight, Donald Trump dominates the headlines again. Some highlights in a move that could cost the Republicans the White House. The GOP frontrunner hints at a third-party run if he's shut out of the nomination. Speaking about being shut out, Republican power players plot to keep Trump off the stage in the debates. Could they succeed? All this as Donald Trump travels to the U.S. border to bring his message on immigration to ground zero.
We just landed, and there were a lot of people at the airport, and they were all waving American flags, and they were all in favor of Trump and what I'm doing. And I mean, virtually everyone that we saw, there was such a great warmth. I was actually surprised. But there was such great warmth at the airport with all of those people that were there. So we're very, very honored. As you know, the Border Patrol was the one that invited me. I think most of you have that invitation. We sent it. The Border Patrol invited me, and then they canceled because, frankly, they don't want to get involved. They know the problem. The reason they invited me was because of the tremendous problem and the tremendous crime and all of the things that you're talking about. So they invited me, and then at the last moment, I mean, we were virtually in the air, and they said, we can't get involved. And I heard they got those orders from Washington.
All right, we're going to get into all of it. You probably noticed the hat, too, Making America Great Again. There you have it. Donald Trump, direct from the U.S. border, joining us here on Newsmax Prime to talk about it. Michael Cutler, former INS agent with 30 years experience with the INS, and Dan Stein, the president of FAIR, the Federation of American Immigration Reform. Welcome to you both. Michael from New York, Dan from Washington, D.C., Donald Trump in Laredo, Texas, to point out flawed areas along the border where Rick Perry did not send the National Guard last year. And Michael, let's start with you. Will it take more than the National Guard to secure the border, as Trump suggests?
Well, it will, and I hope that we don't get so caught up once again in just looking at 4 border states, but recognize that the immigration system has 50 border states. And I think the key to this, really, is to back up whatever we do on the border, and we certainly have to reinforce the border. I don't want anyone getting the idea, I don't think we need to. We absolutely have to. But you really need meaningful interior enforcement. You can't win a baseball game if you have the outfielders sit out the game. You can't approach this problem of illegal immigration without meaningful interior enforcement. And by the way, the 9/11 Commission made it clear that interior enforcement was critical for national security as well.
Dan, I want to jump in. Talk about these Border Patrol agents. We heard Donald Trump talk about it, not even allowed by their union leaders to meet with Trump. A major disappointment, I think. They weren't able to actually meet Donald Trump. What were your thoughts as far as the dynamics behind this?
But rank-and-file Border Patrol officers and certainly ICE agents and DHS, they've all been chloroformed, suffocated, put under a shroud of secrecy because this administration, the Obama administration, is destroying our immigration and entry controls. Look, Donald Trump has tapped into a very deep-seated public discontent with what the Obama administration is doing, and the fact that the Republican Party is acting hostilely is actually probably going to jeopardize Republican possible chances coming up in 2016, because in the end, everybody can see that Donald Trump is telling people something they want to hear because they have had enough with illegal immigration.
Well, Michael, is this an orchestrated attempt now by establishment groups really to stop Trump at any cost?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's both sides of the aisle that got us into this mess. It was Jimmy Carter who said we couldn't use the term illegal alien to describe illegal aliens, and the term alien simply means any person who's not a citizen of the United States. It was Reagan who gave us the first amnesty, never hired enough agents. It's been both sides of the aisle. Too many people are feeding at a very deep and lucrative trough, and the Americans are paying the price in many ways. We're bleeding red and green. It's the jobs, it's the money being sent out of the country by foreign workers, and it's the Americans who are falling victim to crime. And by the way, you know, if Jay Johnson talks about this huge haystack looking for deadly needles, you have immigrant communities which really serve as huge haystacks in which those deadly needles are hiding, and not just terrorists, but transnational criminals from every ethnicity from across the planet.
And Dan, let's talk about the wall right now, because I think, you know, beyond the theatrics of the visit to Laredo, you know, Donald Trump really talked about specific things, says we need to complete the border wall along the Mexican border. Is this even possible?
Well, of course it's possible. We can build a wall. We can get a man to the moon. We can obviously build a wall. That's nonsense. We've got a tremendous technological ability to do whatever we want as a country. What we lack is political will. The split within the Republican Party we see right now is that you have the business wing that wants cheap labor, and then you have rank-and-file Republican voters. The Republican Party is going to have to decide where it sits on this issue, because in the end, if Donald Trump bolts the party and decides to run as an independent, it's a greater threat, obviously, to the Republican candidate than to the Democrat. But this is really, we're coming to a Waterloo politically at this juncture. Either the Republican Party decides to establish itself at variance with the Democrat position, which is to destroy immigration limits and controls, or they're going to join with the Democrats in sanctioning what is ongoing immigration anarchy. So ultimately, Donald Trump, whatever happens to his campaign, is setting the marker, or the immigration issue is going to be a big factor in 2016. And I think we should all enjoy the opportunity to ask our candidates, where do they stand on sanctuary cities, border control, interior enforcement? How are we going to make sure that every immigrant who comes in the future is a legal immigrant?
Yeah, let's talk about legal immigration because, Michael, Donald Trump talks about the Canadian merit-based plan. Canadians examine how a legal immigrant can benefit their economy by the individual skill set. Is this something that would work here in the United States?
Well, in theory, we have it. But the problem, again, comes back to the lack of integrity to the system. When you have Silicon Valley petitioning for hundreds of thousands of H-1B visas, something that Rubio wants, something that Rand Paul wants, something that Ted Cruz wants, and we're laying off tens of thousands of high-tech workers, my problem with it is, are we going to wind up displacing Americans and bring in foreign workers who will earn far less money? And, you know, India, who sends us the greatest number of foreign workers, had the greatest amount of remittances last year, over $70 billion, money not earned by Americans or earned inside the United States. Shouldn't we be trying to hire Americans before we look to bring in foreign workers?
Dan, let's talk about Trump's 5-point plan. Enforce our laws, overturn President Obama's ICE recommendations for illegal immigrant detention facilities, oppose the DREAM Act, finally respect the immigrants who stand in line for legal citizenship. Is this the plan really for a foundation for a long-lasting, successful immigration policy? What are your thoughts?
It's got some very good elements because in the end, the social contract that binds us together resides upon a basic principle: respect for citizenship, respect for law, is the cornerstone of citizenship. As citizens, we're all obligated to respect the law. So why should a group of people be able to break the law, jump in front of the line, get special treatment, get access to our benefit programs, and then turn around and have politicians, force politicians basically to give them all amnesty? What Donald Trump is really talking about here is the core set of questions that determine whether we are going to be one people, that play by the same rule book, that say, look, if you don't play by the rules, you don't get to play the game. And it deals with fundamental fairness. Is it complete? Is it comprehensive? Look, immigration is obviously a difficult and challenging and very complex policy process.
All right, Dan, I'm going to jump in right there. I wish we had more time. We really got to some interesting aspects, though, of the issue. Michael Cutler joining us from New York, Dan Stein from Washington, D.C. And is this a winning issue for Donald Trump? He continues to gain in the polls. Would you vote for him? Cast your vote for your favorite GOP candidate. You can see, go to vote at www.newsmaxpolls.com. And of course, Donald Trump's book remains at the top of the GOP polls. And his book right now, looking at different issues, Trump's bestseller is called Time to Get Tough, and it outlines Mr. Trump's plan to roll back Obama's policies, secure the border, terrorism, and much more. Next, on Newsmax Prime, Donald Trump making himself heard at the border today, but there is a movement to silence him at next month's GOP debate, the high-profile organization that does not want him on that stage in Cleveland. Could a secret agreement bring down the Iranian nuclear deal? We're going to hear from Michael Hayden, the former head of the NSA and CIA. FBI Director James Comey declares Al-Qaeda is no longer America's #1 enemy, what he believes should be our #1 concern.